Welcome to the Clause YouTube channel.
Together, we strive for a safer, secure, and more stable world.
Hello and welcome to Strategic Frontlines, the official YouTube channel for the Center for Land Warfare Studies. We are back today with a discussion on a very current and grave topic, the Bondi beach terror attacks. Before we get into the subject, I'd like to take a quick minute and introduce our esteemed panel that we have to discuss this topic. We have with us Mr. Mahadevan Shankar, a Brisbane-based chartered accountant, strategic advisor, and CEO of Arzuh International, specializing in critical mineral trade and particularly India-Australia trade under the ECTA. We also have with us Dr. Tara Kartha, former NSCS and presently Director Research and Academics at Clause, an absolute authority on terrorism and radicalism. And we also have with us Lieutenant General Dushyant Singh, Param Vishish Seva Medal, Ati Vishish Seva Medal, Director General Clause, an infantry officer, a prolific counterterrorism commentator, and author of Grey Zone Warfare, The Way Ahead for India. Welcome to our panel. I will just start by giving a brief on the tragedy that has unfolded at the Bondi beach in Sydney, Australia. It was an evening of celebration that quickly turned into a bloody massacre when, on 14th December, two gunmen opened fire on families and communities that had gathered to celebrate the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah at Sydney's Bondi beach. The gunmen have now been identified as Nawed Akram, 24 years old, and Sajid Akram, 50 years old. These two gunmen have been responsible for the killing of 15 people and wounding 40 others. The attack has been labeled a terrorist attack, and there have also been links established with the Islamic State. While this is a developing story, certain things have come to the fore. The foremost being the radicalisation network across Australia that is being highlighted. So one of the assailants, Nawed Akram, he was in 2019 also being investigated for links with the Islamic State, and we have seen him being responsible for this attack. Apart from that, there is a lot of information that is still coming about, but a key aspect of this attack was about a 27-28 day trip that the father-son duo took to the Philippines. So what angle does that give us? So with that, we will be getting into the discussions with our panel today. We are also hopefully going to be joined by Ms. Anju Gupta. And while we wait her arrival, I think we can begin with the opening remarks from our panel. So maybe start with Mahadevan, sir.
Thanks, Aishwarya, and thank you, General Dushyant Singh, for having me on this panel, and Dr. Kartha. I would first of all just like to pay my respects to the victims who unfortunately passed away in this crazy, ridiculous, blasphemous terrorist attack. It just is beyond imagination. It could happen on mainland Australia, a massive continent country with a maritime domain like this. But this, frankly, has been coming. It's been coming for the past few years. And I would like to pretty much categorically say this is an ideological warfare that's going on in Australia now. It's been going on for a while. And the Islamic State have been having their roots right over here. In fact, I was reading some reports in the past few days, and it brings me back to what George Brandis, the former Attorney General of Australia, said in 2014. There were over 200 Australian citizens who flew to Syria to fight for ISIS in those days. And he said roughly it could be even 1,000, unofficial numbers. So when you look at 200 plus citizens from Australia going out there, there is a massive ecosystem out here. There is overground workers, underground workers, and the amount of intelligence that should have been gathered, the amount of data that should have been gathered, should have all been processed, and they should have had their eyes and ears open. In fact, you named the younger one who has been radicalized. As a 19-year-old, he was already visiting the mosque of a known radical ISIS preacher who has been talking a lot in terms of quoting from the Quran that the infidel should be killed and anyone out there is open season, for want of a better word. There was also another ISIS sympathizer who was picked up, and he was in fact convicted and sent to prison for 4 years. And in 2023 he was released. And I think last year it was during the Palestine-Israel conflict that was happening. There was a massive protest that happened in Sydney. So now the Akram was seen out there with these ISIS guys. There were a lot of red flags that have been missed out, to be honest, in this Bondi Beach attack. It's not something that should have happened, but I hope, we can look backwards in hindsight and capture a lot of data that's flowing out in the past 48, 72 hours. But as a go forward, there is plenty that Australia can possibly learn from what India has been experiencing, especially in counterterrorism capabilities, as well as how India attacked the terrorists after Pahalgam happened. Operation Sindoor is a classic example. And I think in some of the comments I've shared with a few people, there seems to be a big deflection of this entire crisis into the gun laws of Australia. Yes, that is an issue, because there are some individuals in Sydney who are, each of them owning about 250 to 300 guns. Individuals living in Sydney. That's a bit ridiculous for a country like Australia, where after Port Arthur massacres happened, all the guns were taken away. So the gun laws are definitely an issue, but the massive terrorism issue, the ideological issue, the visit to Philippines by these two individuals, father and son, the amount of military training they got, all of that will need to be investigated. There will need to be some introspection. A lot of people are definitely asking for the Prime Minister of Australia to step down immediately because of the pandering and the appeasement politics that has happened in the past 24 months. There has been a major outcry because there were a lot of red signals on anti-Semitism out here. Synagogues were being attacked, and Jewish families were being attacked and targeted. Jewish leaders were being targeted. In fact, just today, the former treasurer, who's also a Jewish person, Josh Frydenberg, he came out pretty much lashing at certain mainstream media reporters and journalists who are supposedly award-winning journalists, to be saying that it's not a religious issue. It was something to be related with gun laws. So while you have one side of the mainstream media in Australia playing it down to gun laws and trying to do the same appeasement politics, some hard lessons are being learned in this, and some tough measures will need to be taken. In fact, the fact that Australia is part of the Five Eyes, I don't know what happened to all the Five Eyes. They are wide shut, to be honest. There should have been intel gathering on this one individual and the entire ecosystem. In fact, just the past few months, there's been, even the past few weeks, there has been a lot of reporting about the wives, the so-called ISIS wives, who are being brought back to Australia with their children. So serious questions are being asked. What is the ecosystem? Where are they being provided? How are they being brought in? What kind of filtering mechanism is being done? When the Gaza conflict was going on, there were more than 3,000 visas apparently issued without much screening being done. And ACO Director General himself said they didn't have the capacity to filter and screen. So visas were processed. Now, I don't have anything personal, but the ACO Director General will need to take ownership and responsibility at some point in time. Heads will have to roll over here, because if that individual was on the radar and he was not monitored, surveillance was not there. Yes, resources is an issue. And in the past 12 to 18 months, the Australian government has poured millions, maybe I would say 100 million plus, into so-called social cohesion grants. Majority of it was given to the Muslim organizations so that the Muslim community feels a bit at home in Australia and that they needed social cohesion. If 100 million was given to ACO, you can just imagine the amount of human intelligence resources they could have created and other technologies. So I'll stop it at that. I could keep ranting for a bit, but I'll let the other speakers speak, and I'll be happy to address a few more as we go along. Thanks, Aishwarya. Back to you.
Thank you so much, sir. And I think you've highlighted some very important aspects, especially the linkage that Naved Akram had with, I think, the person you were talking about, that's Wissam Haddad, the radical leader who's been linked not just to him, but the broader network of people who have been associated with Islamic State. And when we are talking about the network, Dr. Tara, please, if I'd like to bring you in to just help us understand how this is sort of coming up, the broader network that we are seeing in Australia of radicalization happening on Australian soil. Ma'am, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, first let's welcome Anju Gupta to the show. She's a former IPS officer, very well known in circles where we move in terms of counterterrorism. She's a very fine officer who's been with, I've worked with. So welcome to the show, Anju. So the what we I think what struck us, Mr. Shankar, in sitting in India, is that why Australia? You know, here apparently everybody has a blast. The Palestinians. I mean, I was just looking at the number of sites, pro-Palestinian action groups, this action group, that action group. They are all over the place. Now, none of this is to say that the Palestinians don't have a cause. They do. I mean, there is a war going on which hopefully will stop soon. But here they have complete freedom of action. So why would they go and attack in Australia? That's one. Number two, I think, as you said, the networks. I mean, both of us, Aishwarya and I, we sat down and we looked at the networks in just, 48 hours, oh my God, it's horrendous. It's this man who was at the center of it, this preacher, this person who started this Al-Risalah, if that's right. Then there's another center which is in a predominantly Lebanese area, migrants over there. They have been going around doing all sorts of things. The son was involved in an IS activity with a known terrorist. There have been a number of terrorists who've been caught recently in Australia. And for us sitting in India, the fact that there was a large Lashkar module in Australia. So this is not new. It has been going on. And the fact that you know the Lashkar model we're talking of in terms of Willie Bridget, in terms of 4 other Australians who were part of this, who were radicalized by this mysterious Sajid Mir in Pakistan. He's the one who set up that whole thing. And Willie Bridget was finally convicted in part, but that was years ago, but it shows a trend of events. But then the cause was different. Now the cause is the Gaza issue. I would like to bring in Anju here in terms of her perspective. How do you see this, Anju, playing out? You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. No,
To my co-panelist.
Yeah.
Gone now?
Good.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So good evening to you all. Thanks for this opportunity. I'd just like to make quick points about the Bondi attack. It must be condemned in no uncertain terms. You can only imagine the plight of people who had to face this kind of a carnage. It's heart-wrenching. It must be condemned, and it must be investigated thoroughly. Were they radicalized, the father and the son? Yes, they were radicalized, and to the extent that they became violent. The radicalization below the threshold of violence is one thing, and radicalization above the threshold of violence is quite another, because people do have political views. They kind of become sentimental about certain issues, as we keep seeing in India also, but does not mean that they cross the threshold of violence. That is where the violent extremism or violent terrorism becomes a problem for a society. The Prime Minister of Australia has said that these two were inspired by ISIS. The word used is inspired. There have been some inputs that these two went to the Philippines and probably got their training there, but the Philippines government has come out very clearly that there is no training happening, military terrorist training happening in the southern parts of Philippines, the Mindanao province, which was once very active, not just for ISIS, but for groups like ASF and etc. Abu Sayyaf group, etc. So yes, that place has been problematic, more so for criminals and traffickers and smugglers of Southeast Asia, but yes, also for ISIS cells, Wilaya, so to say. since the government of the Philippines has said that there was no terrorist training and there's no terrorist training taking place in the southern parts of in Mindanao, so Philippines, I think we need to believe them too. So let's see what has happened. So in that sense, what Prime Minister of Australia is saying seems to be the case, that it was inspired. Inspired basically means that these two were inspired by ISIS ideology, and the ideology radicalized their minds to an extent where they became violent, and so violent. Now, the Western experts have been saying in such attacks, or where the attacks have been prevented in the West, that the primary propaganda that has been accessed by such radicalized people is pegged around Gaza. There is no doubt about it now. They're uh, top level, and people who are very experienced. These Western experts are calling it, saying that the ISIS propaganda is around Gaza. That is the predominant sentiment, which is being exploited in this propaganda, which people use, and they become such radicals. Their radicalization took place offline, online, or hybrid. I think these are things which will come out as we go along with investigation. I found Australians to be very open people, very open in terms of briefing that they've been giving. So I sense that they would be sharing, more bits with us all and the public. The moot question for me here is that this father and the son, the attack that they mounted, they were fidains, which means they were willing to die till the very end. They did not try to run away, right? And they hadn't reached a point in time where they could have used the IEDs, which could have caused much more mayhem. What triggered this? So it is one thing to have political views. It's one thing to have violent political views. It is one thing to kind of get up and throw a shoe at somebody, write a graffiti. These are shades of radicalized minds. And we see that. We are also a very diverse society. But it is quite another to pick up the gun and kill people in a fit of rage. It is quite another to have planned and done it. It is also quite another for it to be a fidine attack. So to me, I think what I'm really waiting for to hear from the Australian authorities in their briefings is what was the trigger for this fidine attack? Why were they so driven to this point? What was the trigger? And triggers are very important to understand when people go for fidine attacks or suicide attacks. The trigger part is very important. Were there any personal journeys? Were people close to them, underwent something? Otherwise, if there's propaganda, hundreds and thousands of millions of people are being exposed to that propaganda, but everybody doesn't take up a gun. So it's very important. So I would say, in order to really understand this radicalization and to prevent such thing from happening, it is very important to get to deep dive into the minds of these two and to understand the trigger. I think that is, I would leave it here, and then I think we'll say more as we go along. Thank you.
Actually, I think I'll just raise, that's a good point, Anju, because there is that kind of slippery slope from writing graffiti to attending meetings. From meetings, you go on to maybe shouting, throwing stones, protests, and then one fine day you go out and kill somebody. Where do you map that progress? That not progress or whatever you want to call it. But in this case, one point I noticed was when they went to Philippines. No, he didn't need training, right? This guy was used to guns. If he had 6 guns, he and his son knew how to use them. So somewhere in Philippines, there was what I think a very good, somebody just mentioned that you need that final push from a group, to get into that way where you say, okay, I'm going to go and do this. Because shortly after he came back, he goes and does this attack. So it's like you said, it's very, very important to understand what happened there. Philippines, Manila, in fact, Mindanao, we know for the fact there were a bunch of Pakistanis also caught there for supplying weapons to a terrorist group there. There was the Abu Sayyaf group which was operating there. Then you had that siege of Manila, if you remember that horrifying siege where the Islamic State and the Abu Sayyaf got together. So my question to Mr. Shankar would be that how did they miss this? I mean, here is a guy who is already on a radar, the son. He goes to Mindanao, comes back, and apparently nobody says anything. I mean, having said all that, I admire Australia hugely in terms of the freedom they give to their citizens. That's a given. But, I mean, how would you like to take this up?
Definitely. I think I picked up on what Ms. Anju Gupta said about the word inspired, that being the operative word. I think that also is downplaying the entire enormity of this ideological terrorist attack. I don't agree that it was inspired, and there is a bit of a concerted effort by the PM and his advisors to downplay this and reduce it to a domestic incident. Because whatever I have analyzed on it, seeing open source intelligence and other sources chatter that's happening, if you look at this attack, it's been executed pretty precisely. On the first day of Hanukkah, they chose the location. They knew the bridge on which they're going to be standing on. They knew the high ground. The weapons used, the father was licensed to have AB category, which is regular sporting guns. But the guns that were used were military grade weapons. It was the bolt action gun, which was a straight pullback, not the one that clocks up and down. So the trip to Philippines was pretty much to sharpen the pencil and get finesse in trying to achieve maximum carnage. The IEDs also, possibly the training has happened over there. I would definitely be interested to see what further comes out from this. The person picked up and the way it has been executed, it has been happening, or it has been in the making for a while. There has been, like you said, the Pakistani presence out there in Mindanao. Whether the ISI is involved or not, we won't know until the investigations are completed. Picking up an Indian origin guy from Hyderabad, getting the son brainwashed, which has been in the works for 6 years. It's not happened overnight. The ISIS connection has been there. In fact, one of the points you mentioned about certain individuals from Australia being picked up, you may recollect David Hicks from Australia. He was picked up in Jammu and Kashmir, and then after that he went to Afghanistan, and then he was sent to Guantanamo Bay. From Guantanamo, he was brought back, and he's sitting somewhere cooling his heels in Australia. There is an ecosystem here. I would definitely be inclined to analyze this ecosystem and dig deeper and deeper into it, because two individuals by themselves doing it without handlers is sounding a bit naive. And if the agencies out here are going to say that it has happened just because they were inspired or motivated, being inspired and motivated is one thing, like what Anju Gupta said. But when there are handlers talking to these guys on a regular basis, meeting them at that particular mosque, which is called Al Madina Dawa Center, where there have been history of other peoples also who have been picked up and convicted for ISIS affiliations. There is a trend in this whole thing. Of course, the investigations will pull out a lot more information, and that's where at the opening I said the Five Eyes have been with their eyes wide shut. And some of the intelligence failures in Australia have been a bit spectacular. Earlier this year, the Chinese Navy ships were there. They were doing live fire exercises 600 kilometers from Sydney. And it took a Virgin pilot to tell them that, hey, you know what, Chinese ships are out here. The Poseidon aircraft was not deployed. So there is some serious intelligence failures that have been happening one after the other, and it has culminated in the Bondi attacks. Now, the choosing of the location of Bondi. Bondi is an iconic location. It captures the world attention. A French man was killed over there. Yes, it's fantastic that the Syrian Muslim Ahmad engaged one of them, brought him down. That was fantastic. In fact, there's another video that's come out of this Russian origin, Boris and his wife, who actually grabbed the rifle of the father, and then at point blank, just before getting on the bridge, he pulled out another weapon from the car and he shot both of them point blank. So there's a lot of training and precision that's gone into it. And I would think that the agencies would need to throw out a lot more rather than sitting and covering it up, calling it a gun license problem or an inspired or a motivation, because this could be the build up to Christmas. And every year we have seen what has happened with Christmas attacks in Europe. And Australia is now becoming a victim of it. So I won't be surprised if there is something more somewhere around the corner that is waiting to happen. This could be the beginning of some more also. So I don't want to go into conspiracy theories, but I'm still monitoring and seeing what else is coming out from the woodworks out here.
Aishwarya, you want to come in here?
Yes, ma'am. I think something that this is highlighting the network that we're talking about. I know we've already discussed, but this has the actors who've been behind it, who've been sort of responsible for radicalizing it. I'm just curious to understand why, when there is evidence linking them to Islamic State, when there is sort of actual videographic evidence showing them inciting violence, is there action not being taken? Number one. And number two, this kind of attack, this sort of father-son style of attack, and a smaller group or a smaller family getting radicalized, what does this tell us about how radicalism is shaping up both in Australia in today's times and also across how it's happening? Also, the digital factor in all of this. So, Ms. Anju Gupta, ma'am, if you could please comment on this.
Oh, I was supposed to comment on this. Okay. First thing is that.
Yeah, anybody.
Okay. So, on radicalization, please understand that radicalization, as I said, happens in stages, and everybody does not gravitate from stage 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 6 and 7. Everybody doesn't gravitate that way. Number two, so there is and to that extent, I would say what Mr. Shankaran is saying, they may have been handlers. Yes, they may have been handlers. They may have been handlers who are based in Australia, maybe not in the Philippines. We don't know. But we have to go by what the Prime Minister of Australia is saying, that it looks like an inspired attack that's based on the investigation which is available today. And we know that investigation the counterterrorism investigation is a very hard investigation. It's like looking for a needle in the haystack, getting data points, connecting them correctly, double checking them. So it is possible that they may have been handlers and who are sitting in Australia itself. We don't know. But since the Philippines government is saying that there is no terrorist training happening in the southern parts, let's believe them also for now. And I think it is up to the two government and the two agencies to take it forward and also probably look at links elsewhere. This is one. Number two, the point which I made earlier, Aishwarya, is that radicalization, one person may go from 1 to 10 depending on the circumstances, depending on the ecosystem, depending on if somebody found an handler. But the motivation to give your life does not come through very ordinary pathways to radicalization. People who are ready to die, they are not normal people. They are highly abnormal people. They don't think and talk like the way you and I do. And at one level, I'm not defending the agencies in Australia, but looking for someone. If this guy was on radar, they may have been maybe 5,000 people on the radar. I don't know, but all 5,000 people cannot be, tracked the way, to this level where this person is saying, ready to strike. I'm not defending anybody. All I'm trying to say, let's wait patiently for the investigation to complete. Then probably we'll have a lot more on this. I'm coming back to the question that I raised, that I'm really surprised about the trigger for this Fidayeen attack in Australia. It's a Fidayeen attack. And it is abnormal. It is not normal. There are people who have given their life. There are people who have mounted suicide attacks only inspired. There was no handler. They were so inspired by that propaganda because of their mental makeup. And they gave up their life in order to destroy somebody else. So they are abnormal people. These are not normal people. So I think that's something we must keep in mind. Is there anything that I have not answered, Aishwarya?
No, ma'am. I think this helps us really understand. Ma'am, sorry.
Yeah, I said that's very well put. I mean, there's a different mind at work here, which you and I cannot readily understand. But
Yes.
but the point she raised is very important. What we were discussing is there are a number of groups like this which are familial and which are engaging in terrorist attacks, or it's a closed group like the Delhi ones which you saw. There are a bunch of doctors all who know each other. So these are closed groups which are now engaging in terrorist acts, and where the source of radicalization is still uncertain. So there is a huge amount on the net. I mean, if you see it, like I said, incidentally, some of these Palestine action groups, I mean, some of the things they put out is pretty shocking. There was one, I think Aishwarya mentioned, there was a rally saying gas the Jews. I mean, this is unbelievable.
In
How can
Sydney
you
Opera
get?
House.
Yes. So I
And
would,
this
with
guy was there. Akram was there with his cleric. They both were, the photographs are circulating now.
exactly. And with the DG's permission, I will pull this slightly into another direction with just one comment that if you do such things, for example, in Canada, you had these guys, I will not call them Khalistanis because there's no such thing called Khalistan. There were these crazy guys putting things out about our ambassador, threatening to kill them, and they did nothing. So I think the lesson here is if you let this, go on rising, you will you will have a problem back at home. So in Aishwarya, if you'd like to raise this issue of that network that which included at least 3 Al-Qaeda terrorists who were linked to this Al-Risala. So that is what happened in the past. You might like to give some details. I think the audience might like to hear.
Sure, ma'am. So I think it's around this cleric called Wissam Haddad. There's a lot of reportage around him. Now we're hearing more about his connects with this, but he has been sort of promoting jihad and supporting the Islamic State very openly in Australia through his sermons. And it goes back to 2007 when he established an organization by the name of the Revisby Muslim Association. He ran that for about 3 to 4 years, and he would give one Friday sermon per month there. Post which, in 2012-13, he founded he was the center director at the Al Risala Center. Now, this center was shut down in September of 2014 for its notorious support for global jihad. So, at the time, there were reports around questioning the center's funding, its teachings, its overseas connections, and also where they were giving money. And there was evidence to show that that at the center, Haddad was actively recruiting young Australians and sending them to fight illegally in Syria. So, this is all open source information that we've gathered from news sources and mostly Australian news sources. Now, some of the people who've lectured at Al Risala, they include Abu Suleiman or Mustafa Muhammad Farag, who is one of Australia's highest ranking Al Qaeda terrorists in Syria. And it was also frequented by Australia's one of the worst terrorists in Australia, Khalid Sharoof. And he's posted some really horrifying images of, people they've killed and all of that. Now, in 2014, Haddad then becomes the spokesperson for the Australian branch of this German-based group, the Milatu Ibrahim, and it had been outlawed in Berlin for 2 years. Um, then his house is raided again in 2015, where they recover a bunch of really problematic things. They recover the Islamic State flag, a machete, and all of these things. And thereafter, he then gets involved with this group called he finds the Al Madina Dawa Center in April 2021. Now, this group has also been responsible for a lot of anti-Semitic sermons, and we've heard there was they had to even retract some of what they put out because of the language that they use. It was really disrespectful. Now, not just this, now the Haddad has been linked to Naved, and not just Naved, but also Naved was linked to him because of Isaac al-Matari. Now, Matari is another character who declared himself the general commander of IS in Australia. And Naved was associated with him because they were seen together doing dawa, which is basically uh, spreading the word of Islam on the streets, by the train stations, and all of that. So there's that video that's going around, which is what has linked Naved to the Islamic State. Now, the fact is that all these links exist, and Haddad has such a long and vast history of being involved, and still people associated with him. It is only after, certain things happen that they have been picked up, and he is still continuing to give those sermons. So, maybe, I mean, if it's okay, sh- what should approach to something like this be? What should the counter to, sermons or just radicalization processes like this be? How should counterterrorism incorporate this, and how do we go from here? uh, Sir
Can I jump in
Shankar?
over there?
Yes,
I'll
please.
share some of the things that have happened in the past 24 months to 2.5 years. There have been some hate crime laws that have been passed where it's up to the minister also to pick up somebody from the street if the words used are within the ambit of the word hate crime. And a lot of conversations also happened when the so-called Khalistanis were attacking the Hindu temples in Melbourne and Sydney and in Brisbane. And a lot of the people in the Hindu community, the Israeli Jew community, the Iranians also came out in support and said, what's happened to your hate crime laws? Why are you not implementing it? Then when the Gas the Jews conversation was erupted in the Sydney Opera House protest, again, people asked, what's happening with the hate crime laws? Why is it not being implemented? You had 90,000 plus people marching on the Harbour Bridge in solidarity with the Palestinian cause. That's fine. But again, you had these ISIS elements hanging around and distributing their ideology with a lot of people. That was a porous recruiting ground, and it was very easy for them to access a lot of teenagers who are totally distracted in life. University campuses were being distracted. People were walking into classrooms while sessions were on and pushing hard the Palestinian and IS ideologies over there. So there has been enough of this done, and now the outcry out here in Australia is enough is enough. It has to be shut down. In fact, there are some wonderful establishments that have been holding the Christmas functions for decades, and those Christmas functions have come under attack. Instead of saying Merry Christmas, they are being told to say Happy Season's Greetings or something like that. So the Australian culture, the values, the way of life, everything has come under attack by the leftist system, and that ecosystem has become an appeasement vote bank politics center out here. I'm not trying to take sides of the left or the right, but even if I'm trying to be moderate, I find it difficult to see where exactly has this government done anything tough. Nothing. And now also the fact that 15 people have been slaughtered on Bondi Beach, the most famous iconic beach, the government is downsizing it to gun laws. They are not talking of it as a serious terrorism crisis that's been manifesting itself over time. And these breeding grounds are all over the country. It's just not in Sydney and Melbourne. There are a lot of the outer suburbs. In fact, you all must have seen one video of a Caucasian blonde woman doing a video recording. And as she's walking on the streets of this township in New South Wales, a policeman tells her to stop recording. And she asks why. He said, oh, this is a predominantly Muslim community, and your recording is going to disrupt the peace and harmony in this community by your recording. So stop it. And that became viral. And people are saying, are we living in Australia or there's a country within a country? So there is a lot of these ghettos, for want of a better word, and these recruiting grounds. It's pretty easy to see there would be multiple connections out here in terms of how the handlers would be operating. So that's where, when they use the word of inspired and softer words out there. The only way forward is to come down hard and heavy on this, saying that, okay, anything that is with Islamist ideology is a terror out here. It's something like what PM Modi said in India. Any terrorist attack is a war in the country. I could not hear PM Albanese say that the next terrorist attack is a war in the country. There is no conversation in the past 48, 72 hours of going hard and challenging the Philippines government and saying, we want to know what's happening in Mindanao. Fine, the agencies have said that. President Marcos Jr. said, no, nothing is happening out there. But where's the proof? Nothing is happening out there. How did these guys fly from Manila to Davao, and from there, the 200-kilometer apparent route that they took to the jungles to go and practice their shooting skills? And how did they choose that location? Why not Kabul? Why not Syria? Why not Pakistan? Why did they go to this place? There has to be a handler who told them how to go there, what to do, who is the contact person, and that ecosystem has to be opened up. And like Dr. Karta said, there is a massive ecosystem within Australia that's overground and underground. It's a matter of just pulling them out. And it's not going to happen overnight. And that's where the Five Eyes will have to come into play. This bigger challenge is, how does the younger generation, how do they get quarantined from further exposure? Yes, there are some laws that are coming that, under 16 cannot access YouTube and all that. But there has to be some form of harsher penalties and laws implemented as soon as possible to make it a deterrence. ACO by itself cannot do it. ACO has capacity, manpower capacity restrictions. Five Eyes has capacity restrictions. So there will be some tough questions asked, and there is already some serious challenges in the past. I remember before the Labour government came into play, the LNP government was there. The boat people had stopped. There were no boats coming in, and the number of people coming in as refugees had stopped. But now in the past couple of years, we have seen some Chinese suddenly pop up in Western Australia in a remote town. Nobody knows how they landed out there. Western Australia, if anybody knows, it's a massive desert. So there is some systemic failures that are happening out here. And the sooner they address it, the better. Otherwise, we are sitting on something bigger that could erupt in Australia anytime. Back to you, Dr. Karta.
I think perhaps DG would like to come in at this point.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you for getting me in. I had almost gone to sleep, but that's on the lighter side to just make the discussion a little more light-hearted. Not that the matter is light-hearted. My condolences to the people who've lost their life. And I will raise few issues which are beyond this particular case. And that is where we need to focus on. The first issue which I want to raise here is that for long now we have sidelined terrorism as the main narrative globally. I think unless and until we get the terrorism narrative back into the global scenario, we will continue to now see a resurfacing of what used to happen about 10 years back, when it used to happen in Europe, or it used to happen in the Americas, or it happened around our region, that is South Asia. So therefore, it was earlier only the South Asia region which was actually more or less, by and large, the victim of terrorism. People quietly sidelined it. Even in the UN, it was India which was raising this particular issue. Nobody else really, other than Israel, of course, which is the other great victim of terrorism, which was trying to do shoulder to shoulder with India. So the first message which must go out by everyone who is a security expert or a commentator: bring back the terrorism narrative into the global scene. Otherwise, we will see more and more of such attacks. The second thing, never assume that terrorism is going to stop. Terrorism changes form. It just transforms. If you think that Al Qaeda, ISIS are different, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Al Qaeda, the people are the same. They leave JEM, they go to LET, they leave LET, they go to ISIS, they leave ISIS, they go to some other group. Similar is the story in West Asia. Wherever you go, their mindset, like somebody said, the mindset is totally different, And about these familial groups, this was a great comment which many people have. I mean, almost all of you have made this comment. Let me tell you, radicalization is not a process of only a particular, let's say, Malvi doing it, or only a particular person who is nominated to do this kind of a preaching all around and recruiting people. It is a very, very long drawn process where families radicalize themselves. If I am born in a radicalized family, you will find from day one I am working towards that. So to say that only Naved was radicalized, it is wrong. It is everyone who's surrounding this particular group. They are all radicalized. They live in this kind of a. Even if you give them a counter logic, they will not listen to that counter logic. So that is the second part. Radicalization is a very, very long process. It happens in environments which are I would say fertile grounds. Let's say a ghetto, something Shankar mentioned about ghetto. Yeah, obviously, because everyone there talks about the same thing. It may be initially just an election result. Subsequently, that election result becomes more violent. Then it gets into protests and revolution. And if it is not revolution, then people turn into taking the path of violence. So merely saying that only 1% people are radicalized, I mean, for God's sake, 25 crores, 1% is how much? You check the population base, check. So it's high time we call spade a spade. Let's be very, very clinical in our analysis. And the clinical analysis is that where are the attacks emanating from? Which are the communities which are actually conducting more such attacks? So it is an out and out religious attack which has got a religious overtone. Whether it was Pahalgam or whether it was Hanukkah. Why did they select it on Hanukkah day? It's supposed to be, they knew that on the beach there will be mostly the Jews. So, and I am sure they would have done some prior recce, etc. So, unearth all the networks, unearth all the connects. I would say also focus on the bigger thing. The third issue which I want to say is that in the last 2 decades or so, I've been studying terrorism since possibly, I've been practicing terrorism since I was a second lieutenant, and I've been studying terrorism since I was a colonel. I'll tell you, read these 2 books called Leaderless Jihad by Mark Sageman, and read the second book called Starfish and the Spider by I think Beckstrom. Yeah, by Beckstrom and Raffman. Please go through their books. The earlier networks were all spider networks. Osama bin Laden becomes the spider, and rest of the people are attaching to him. He realized the mistake. So therefore, the new types of networks started coming, which are called the starfish network. It is the starfish networks which are now prevalent all over the world. Whether it is Delhi Blast, where you found all doctors, etc., coming together, it's a very small network. There will be a similar network elsewhere in the country. We have to literally now search every nook and corner to find the starfish networks. Their spider is the ideology. Ideology becomes a spider which cannot be connected. So even if you cut out one network, you don't know how many are there in possibly Gujarat, Kerala, or any other place, or for that matter in Sydney, Belgium, Netherlands, you name it. All over there are these kind of networks which are floating around, whether it is West Asia, whether it is Gaza, Syria, all over. So I think there is also a need for us to identify the transformation which is taking place in terrorism. And this transformation is getting more and more dangerous. And it is getting more and more challenging for the security personnel to unearth them. Thank God to that poster man, the policeman who saw the posters being pasted in JNK, because of which we were able to get onto this particular network of Delhi Blast. And similar will be the story elsewhere. There was a Gujarat network which was happening separately. So I think the transformation of terrorism also needs to be studied quite in depth. Fidain, I mean, I also saw this thing about Fidain. Fidain is a tactics. Fidain attack is a tactics. Earlier, there used to be suicide bombing. Suicide bombing. They realized that you may get your target, you may not get your target. Fidain attack is an attack where he intends to carry on attacking till he dies, and not that he dies and then the others die. No. So Fidain attack is the flavor of the last, I think, 1 or 2 decades. Suicide bombing is reduced over a period of time. So we also need to be prepared as security forces to deal with Fidain attacks. We chance on a one uh, smart or a one brave civilian, like for example in Mumbai, we had one of the constables grabbing Ajmal Kasab. You managed to get this fellow, got to establish the connection to Pakistan, etc. So similar is the story in the case of Bondi attack, where one of the persons, he was able to grab the fellow from the back and then get him into capture. So probably we'll get more and more details of such a network, whether it is the Philippines which is involved in it. We need to we need to convey this message across here. The attack in Philippines today is fine, that it's not, no attack has taken place in Philippines. Tomorrow Philippines will be a casualty, and I can bet you, I have studied the Abu Sayyaf group in detail in 2007 and 8. Of course, it got eliminated over a period of time, but they will transform into some other format, and ultimately the people of Philippines will also suffer. What you sow, so shall you reap. If you are holding terrorists in your country, you will definitely get back the thing in kind. We take Pakistan, you take any other country, and I believe in the Bondi case also, Shankar shared something with me. It's the same thing alive. It is turning back to bite the Australians. So I think we need to be very careful before we do these, before we take any action which might actually hurt you in the long run. And the last point which I want to give you is that yes, about the Israel connection. Now, somebody was asking me a question today in the day. What was the motive? Look, at times I find that there is a motive, but at times I find that there is a motive to fight. For example, suppose Israel-Hamas standoff gets resolved. There are so many fighters who get freed. What do? They start searching for their cause in elsewhere, some other place, some other country. You saw this thing happening after the Afghan War 1, after the Afghan War 2. India was a victim of that also. I'm not discussing India, but I'm just giving you as an example that when you get radicalized, you get into this habit of doing things which have become your bread and butter in terms of survival or living the way you try to live the life. So I feel that uh, uh, countries which were having a very soft corner for terrorism must wake up. Whether it is Europe suffered in between, so they have tightened their screws. But I think Australia also needs to do the similar thing. Call spade a spade, go after the guys, and ensure all precautionary measures which can prevent any future attacks. After all, these people have been in Australia for 20 years, 25 years, I don't know how many years. So therefore, there has to be some internal breeding ground which is trying to prop them up. And the example which Shankar mentioned is absolutely right. Is there a country within a country? We also need to look at ourselves. Are we also not creating country within a country? Are we not placating people? I think security should be delinked from politics. I have always said there should be a constitutional amendment to say that nobody will comment on security matters. If a policeman has to do his job, let him not be interfered by state politics. If there has to be a counter infiltration grid put into the to X border or Y border, let it be done. Let him work. He's so disheartened when he finds that what he I kind of catch a chap who's definitely infiltrating. He is a confirmed terrorist or anti-India, I would put it that way. After about 10-15 days interrogation, and he's left. My point is, if somebody is caught doing something, please deal with him firmly. There is no this leniency to be shown to people who are indulging in anti security measures. Security measures have to be put into place. I'm sorry, I'm very very blunt on these issues, but I think it is required for us to change gears and call spade a spade. Get back the terrorism into the national narrative as well. Even in the national narrative, it was losing steam.
Can I
We want
just
we want 4-5 Delhi blasts to take place before we start telling people that look, we have to do something serious about it.
Yeah, I think
Thank
that those points are very well taken. I think it's time we definitely call a spade a spade. I just wanted to say one thing. We also have a hero who is not been recognized. And I think we need to recognize our heroes as well. One of them was that Poniwala. I think his
Yeah,
name was...
Adil Shah.
Yeah,
Adil Shah.
why can't he be recognized as a hero? He sacrificed his life saving terrorists. I mean, look at
No,
the
I
media which is this gentleman. I mean,
no. I mentioned it in my talk to the Air Force Association and the Southwestern Air Command 3 days back, and I mentioned this fellow's name. See, it's not that everybody is bad. It is just that we are creating that environment
no, but the point
where
is the media didn't pick it up.
where
The
people
media
are.
pick up these stories, and our
I
media
think
does.
media did pick up.
Sorry,
I think he was awarded by the state government, if I'm not wrong.
but
I think
thank you.
Farooq Abdul, sorry, what is his name? Omar Abdullah. Omar Abdullah did give him something. The
Yeah, but
family.
we should, as a country, like the way they've been felicitating justifiably so. This person who nearly got killed. I mean, that's amazing. The whole Australia is saying he's a hero, he's a Muslim, but they still say, hey, he's heroic. So I think that kind of narrative we need to follow. I think, can we, Ashwarya, can we put this question to Anju? This is how does India deal with this? I mean, what are the lessons we learn? Can you put that question up?
Sure, ma'am.
I think Anju's left.
Yeah, I think, ma'am.
No,
Just
she was
in
there.
while she's
Ma'am,
connecting
She was
back.
there. No, she was there. She's there. She's there.
She's back.
She must be having some connection issues.
Anju,
Think something
would you
went.
like to? Yeah, sorry. Would you like to take
What's
this
the question? What's the question?
It's on the
I
screen.
haven't. Can you see me?
From this,
Yeah.
yeah.
He says basically, what lessons can India learn from this to avoid such? What can we learn?
Well, we did see a homegrown attack, suicide attack in the heart of Delhi on November 10th. That was also intended to cause. It was also intended to cause harm to people. It was done in public place. So we've seen something similar, though different modus operandi, but essentially the intent was the same.
Yeah.
I think one lesson is that we should be putting a lot of effort on our counterterrorism work. I'm not saying it is not happening, but counterterrorism again operates at different level. And in this day and age of openness, a lot of information coming out on the in social media, online, you would realize that in media rooms, on television channel, people sit and discuss counterterror investigations, which is unwise. They name people and they say he did this, he did that, without having any evidence. Just on the basis of 24/7 information which is being put out, people frame their minds, and what they do is they do counterterrorism investigation sitting in television studios. This is something which harms the case. It is something which kind of pushes the narrative in wrong direction. It builds pressure on counter-terror experts and the police, because the investigation should not be discussed in public. It should only come out in official briefings, truthfully, and every document is put before the court of law. I think that's where the discipline, I think, has gone missing globally. Globally, everywhere, people will start discussing the investigation in TV rooms, in in conferences, without any evidence to back it up. I think that is where we start affecting the minds and we start building pressure. That should not happen. Second, the counterterrorism investigation also, the counterterrorism work also takes place on social media, through social media interdiction, so to say. There are people who are discussing their radical views. Somebody will catch them directly or through controlled operation and call it a counterterrorism work. It's great C. It is great C to counterterrorism work, but again, it'll be eulogized. People will talk about it, write about it, and again make opinions. Anecdotal evidence will be used to extrapolate. Wrong, because that's not counterterrorism grade A. Counterterrorism grade A is looking for a needle in the haystack, which is to actually look at the networks. And if we miss the network, then what we saw in Delhi happened, and then what we have seen in Bondi has happened. So I'm not saying it's very easy to say, look for a network, get a network. But I think the lesson of both Delhi and Bondi to me is that I think it's time that the experts and the police and agencies will have to really double, quadruple their effort on looking for these networks. And those things cannot be discussed publicly, and they cannot come out publicly. Otherwise, they harm the investigation. And they build pressure and they color people's thinking. It's the hardcore counterterrorism work is unglamorous. It is really hard. It will never come out in public. People will not know who did what and who found out what. And again, a legal route is used to kind of nail people down and to link the evidence. And that is why we have such laws. So I think that is what I would. These are the lessons. So I see a repeat of Delhi in Sydney, purely from a CT point of view. And again, that highlights the need to look for these networks. And they cannot be discussed in TV studios. They cannot be discussed in press. They can't be discussed on social media. That, I think, is a mockery of counterterrorism work. To me, I may be using strong words, but I may be using strong words, but I really mean it. Because if we get swayed by that, and we congratulate ourselves for doing great counterterrorism work, this is what will happen.
Absolutely, 100%. I think that is absolutely.
Right? So complacency will set in if we don't stop that practice. This practice, it's global. Globally, this is happening globally. It's not just in India and Australia. It's happening globally.
Mr. Mahadevan, would you like to have the last 1 minute and then we'll close the show? Anything you'd like to make some closing remarks, and then I'll hand over to Aishwarya.
Sure. Actually, this incident took me back to 1993 bomb blast when I was in Mumbai. And I remember the then IB director, Bishamjit Bab, he almost himself got taken out. But the plausible deniability was very well established, where it was the ISI agent and they were using Indian guys from Mumbai, and the underworld were used. And the pattern is something similar that I'm seeing out here. And I would not want to discount any involvement of ISI out here. Unfortunately for Australia, I don't think many people are aware that ISI was founded by an Australian, Major General Walter Cawthon. After World War II, he was deputed from the British Army to go to Pakistan, and he was the founder of the ISI. So I wouldn't want to say chickens have come home to roost, but if there is an ISI angle, I would not want to discount that, because we have seen ISI to be the fountainhead of everything, whether it's 9/11, whether it's 7 October, there's a linkage everywhere, even in Kabul falling down. Mossad has given enough warnings out here. Benjamin Netanyahu was not mincing his words when he said the Australian leadership has failed miserably in protecting the Jewish community. And not just the Jewish community. I mean, I see people even from the Christian community also who feel scared out here, the Hindu community, the Iranian community. So lot of this massive support that was given to the protests in the past 24 months has caused a big division in the society. So they need to change the fabric out here and come down heavily against anyone who's attempting to disrupt, whether it's Christmas or any religious function. And the fact that Hanukkah was targeted, there is a big messaging that's coming out from here, whoever orchestrated this. So I just hope and pray there is nothing more that comes out in the next few weeks of the Christmas holiday season. There's already 15 lives lost. That's 15 families who have been impacted. And I think there's many people around who are feeling unsafe over here. Australia can definitely pick up the phone and talk to people in India and learn what are the connections that India has learnt in the past so many years or decades, I would say. I'm biased, being of Indian origin, but having spoken to a lot of people out here in the intelligence community, the defense network, everybody, they do. In fact, in Jan 22, the then Governor General Peter Cosgrove, he pretty much openly said that his 1 year of training in the National Defense College in Delhi helped him in whatever he did in East Timor. So I don't think Australia should think twice about seeking help from India in counterterrorism. I'll leave it at that.
Aishwarya?
Ma'am. Thank you, sir. And we know that this is a developing story, but I think today we've got some very deep and keen insights from our exceptional panel. So thank you so much to all our guests and our audience for joining us today. And a very good evening to everyone. Jai Hind.
Thank you all. Thanks very much.
Oh, DG wants to say the last word.
No. I don't want to say the last word. I just want to apologize to the people who've asked a number of relevant questions, like how is the digital platform helping the terrorists, etc. These are very, very important questions, and they need to be actually worked upon. And both academicians, practitioners, the investigators, everybody has to actually go through the latest developments which are taking place. See, the technology is being used to the maximum and the hilt, not only by the security agencies, but also by these networks, these kind of people who are equally versatile. Like a few years back, you saw in India engineers undertaking this kind of an attack. They were either associated with the IMs or Simi or Indian Mujahideen, etc. So it's a cat and mouse game, and I'm sorry for the audience for not having given you the opportunity to answer your questions. Thank you, Jahan.
Thank you.
Jai Hind, sir.